Hello and welcome to another Highlander Decktech video on Feuerball. This is another quick tech, so to speak. So this is the English summary of the full interview on this deck. If you're interested in more details while I talk with the creator of this deck, please check the video description for the link to the full video and also for the deck list. So Ramp is a very simple and very renowned archetype in Magic, and in general it does very simple things. It produces mana and it releases fatter threats than any other deck. In Highlander this is no different, but it is quite interesting to see which card choices are involved in a Highlander Ramp deck. So there is plenty of Ramp decks around. We will focus today on the green, white, black, so the Abzan Ramp version. First of all, there's lots of mana dorks, because mana dorks are the best way to accelerate, so to speak, because you can play them on turn 1 and then on turn 2 you are already on 3 mana if you have only played another land. So any of the 1-drops that produce mana are welcome in this deck, and also there is 2 mana drops like Wall of Roots and Devoted Druid, which also ramp very quickly and are thus also welcome. And there is utility 1-drops which do also ramping. Of course, they are also part of this deck, as well as Rofello's Lanova Emissary. We have enough forests to produce a ton load of mana, and Uraga Treespeaker and Sylvan Caryatid are also quick enough, big enough mana acceleration dogs. And then there is also mana acceleration which is not dogs, for example land enchantments that cost only 1 mana, which have essentially the same effect as Lanova Elf when played turn 1, but they are quicker as Lanova Elves in the later game, so to speak, because if you play it on an untapped land you can immediately use the mana that results from it. And especially sweet is if you cast this on a forest, which is the main type of land we have in our deck, you can use Arbor Elf to untap the forest for double mana reusage. And also there's Grim Monolith, which is probably the best mana stone there is, because it costs 2, produces 3 and doesn't untap, but you can untap it for 4 mana. But if you don't, it doesn't hurt you like other mana artifacts known in other formats do. So this is also nice acceleration. It's plus 1 mana always, and if you cast it on turn 2, you have 3 extra mana on the next turn, which is often enough to release a then lethal threat or then game-stealing threat. And there is 2 kinds of payoffs to this deck, though. On the one hand, this is value, and on the other hand, this is fat. Let's focus on the value first. This is things that, for example, do something with lands such as Tireless Tracker, Course of Crewfix, Lotus Cobra, Ramen-Up Excavator, and also things that simply generate extra value. Eternal Witness as the All-Star, which is a creature-centered regrowth, and Voice of Resurgent, which is great against instant and counter magic. And then there is the slightly bigger value, so this is sort of the fat of the deck, but it's also value at the same time, because all Ramp wants to do is to compensate for the loss of cards, so to speak, that is created by the early mana drops, to compensate for that with creatures that generate enough value to have virtual or actual card advantage. And so bigger value creatures would be Questing Beast, which has simply lines and lines of insane text, Thragtusk, which is a very good card against aggressive decks, Titania, which is nice synergy with all the lands and extra land techniques in this deck, Primeval Titan, which gets extra lands, and there is also some special non-basic lands in this deck, which we will focus on when we talk about the mana base, and Woodland Bellower as a tutor for small creatures, for example Eternal Witness or any other non-legendary green 3 or less drop. And of course there's the Creator of Behemoth, which produces an +X effect, where X is the number of creatures you control, and it has self-haste and gives also trample. So this is really a board with a group of mana elves becomes a really serious threat once a Creator of Behemoth enters the stage. Only of course when the mana dogs weren't tapped to cast it, because then they don't do much combating. And value, because this is Modern Magic, not only comes in form of creatures with lots of text, but also in planeswalkers with a lot of text. So the 3 walkers of the choice are Nissa Vital Force, Nissa Who Shakes the World, Vivian Monsters Advocate, and Karak Wildspeaker, which are very great green value machines for various reasons. I can back refer to the full video if you want the author's comments on why exactly these planeswalkers. And what would a Modern Magic deck be without cantrips? Cantrips are the grease on the gears on every Modern Magic deck. So they are arguably less than in other decks, because this deck doesn't run blue, but still it's no reason to not play Gitaxian Probe. And of course there's Once Upon a Time, which is a free spell if it's the first one, and a cantrip later on, Sylvan Library, Turn-Timber Symbiosis, and Palakat Recovery, which are not actually cantrips, but which are value attached to lands, so they come at no cost, just like cantrips. And then there is the vast category of utility. So the Dried Arbor is in the deck because, as we will see in the tutor section, we run Green Sun's Zenith, so there's an additional option to produce a mana dog like Line of Elf on turn 1 if you cast Green Sun's Zenith for X equals 0 to get Dried Arbor. Scavenging Ooze is very useful utility in times where Oracle and Uro are on the loose. Opposition Agent is just a very, very nasty card, which a fetch land from the opponent can be enough. If Opposition Agent is flashed in response, this can create really, really massive impact on the game. And Night of Autumn is a value engine because there's many options that can help in specific situations, and as we'll see later, this deck has tutors, so whenever you need any of these problems solved, so if you need a fatty, need a naturalize, or need life, then you can tutor for Night of Autumn. Another utility package is Stoneforge Mystic with 2 good swords, which is the green-black and the blue-red sword, to equip self or, for example, mana elves with swords that are best suited for the respective opponent colors or decks. What is missing here is the Beta Skull, which is usually the number 1 card with Stoneforge Mystic, but in a ramp deck there is so much better stuff that can be done with the mana, so that Beta Skull is actually worse Skull in this deck. And more utility is Palace Jailer and Voracious Hydra, which is removal on a stick that can be tutored with creature tutors. Shalai, which is protection, as well as Whisperwood Elemental, which can be sacrificed to mitigate the effect of a mass removal spell. More utility stuff is Trinisphere, because once you have gotten to 3 mana, it is likely that the other deck you're playing against hasn't, so you produce more mana than the opponent, so Trinisphere is often a real nuisance for the opponent when the aforementioned grease in form of cantrips suddenly costs 3 mana, then it's really, really stale grease. And Elishnorn is, it's a bit bold to call it utility. It's all rather game-winning, almost like Crater of Behemoth, but still a useful card in various situations to tutor. Then there's another Planeswalker, Vraska, Golgari Queen, which doesn't create that much straight-out value and threat as the aforementioned mono-green Planeswalkers, but it serves as a removal spell on a Planeswalker stick, which is very useful. So tutors, we have talked about this. Of course we run Demonic Tutor because it's the best tutor there is, which is Highlander legal, but we can also run Green Sun Zenith because there is many green creatures which we want to fetch. Same is true for Worldly Tutor, Adamri's Call, Fiend Artisan, and Fauna Shaman, but we also have some land tutoring because, as we will see later, in the mana base there is also some utility, some value hidden in the land base. And more tutors reside on creatures, such as Fierce Empath or Knight of the Reliquary, or more stuff that tutors for creatures and accidentally can also produce overruns, as in the case of Finale of Devastation. So in the land base, Gaea's Cradle is a is a real thing. So this deck runs so many small creatures that Chaos Cradle is most likely to be an insane boost of mana. Every now and then Chaos Cradle will falter when there's no creature on your battlefield because the opponent has been supposed to deal with your creatures, but in most cases this is a very insane ramp. Cavern of Souls can choose pointedly certain creature types that are very necessary to resolve, for example Giant to resolve Primeval Titan, and also produces mana of different colors, which is good as this deck splashes white and black, so to speak, with a heavy centering on green. Wasteland is a staple in Highlander, and so is Caracas. Castle Garenbrick is a nice addition from recent times, which simply skips one mana slot in the mid game. And for me, the most interesting part here is Celestina Sanctuary, because these Ravnica originating bounce lands generate card advantage, because they produce 2 mana out of 1 card. But they produce, of course, also tempo disadvantage. So if you run into a wasteland with this, then it's pretty bad. But if you don't, you have generated card advantage. This is something to be kept in mind, and which is important for the ramp deck. And more lands include the duels, the good fetchable duels from Ravnica and the original duels, also Solar Ring mana, so to speak, Ancient Tomb and City of Traitors, and lands that can recycle for new cards, Horizon Canopy and Nurturing Peatland, so the in-color Canopy lands. And then, of course, fetches to extract the mana from a deck, including Prismatic Vista, because this deck also runs basic lands, 1 plains and 7 forest. The black splash is facilitated via duels only. So to conclude, Ramp, and in special case Abzan Ramp, is a very fast and very strong value deck with lots of good matchups in the current meta, but to be honest, it sucks against almost all combo decks that are around at the moment. So if you have good matchups, you are quite fine, but on a bad day where you're paired King combo decks alone, it can be a shitty day for the Ramp deck. And also, yeah, we will not talk about Opposition Agent because she's been a bad girl. Whenever she met the Ramp deck, something bad happens, and supposedly Ramp never won after she came for a visit, so yeah, we're not going to talk about Opposition Agent. Okay, let's talk about Opposition Agent, it's too important. So, since Opposition Agent was printed, Ramp has gotten another very formidable foe. So this is the card that can beat this deck single-handedly. So be careful when the opponent threatens to have 3 mana open. This can not only mean that the opponent is a hate bear and flashes a Mind Sensor, which is bad enough for tutoring, but Opposition Agent is the new Mind Sensor, and this is beyond description what this card does to this fetch land and tutor heavy ramp deck. So that's all from me today. Be sure to leave likes, comments, subscriptions, and bring a friend. Tell that this channel is around that provides you with nice Highlander content. Thank you for watching and see you next time.